What would you do if a complete stranger invited you over for dinner? Would you go? If you said yes, you might end up eating dinner with an angel. Before we get into today's story, if you're new here, we tell angel and miraculous stories that will leave you feeling encouraged and uplifted. And if you're a fan of that, please subscribe and turn on the notifications so you don't miss any new videos. All right, let's get into today's story. It was 1969, right before Thanksgiving, and Ivy Olsen and her husband had recently just gone through a nasty divorce. And just a side note, God hates divorce. He doesn't hate divorced people. Ivy had 2 young boys, and they lived in a small apartment, struggling to make ends meet. Now, Ivy had a job at a doctor's office, but even so, they were living worse than paycheck to paycheck. Money was tight, to say the least. Their situation was so bad, Ivy and her sons were planning on eating hot dogs for Thanksgiving. Ooh, were these foot-long Chicago dogs with the works? No, these were frozen hot dogs that you'd find at your local gas station. Some Thanksgiving meal. So Ivy's feeling terrible that she can't provide a decent meal for her 2 boys. So she decides to take them to the local park on Thanksgiving. Maybe just try to have fun at least, and to keep their mind off of, not having any food. So they grill their hot dogs there, and they're actually having a really good time at the park playing. But after that picnic, reality sank in again, and Ivy's kids were still hungry. But she had nothing to give them. This is when Ivy started to feel so depressed, so low. I mean, imagine not being able to feed your kids when they're looking to you to provide for them. When they arrive back at the apartment complex, they start making their way up the stairs to the 2nd floor to their apartment. And they are stopped by a voice beneath them. "Ooh, honey." Ivy stops and looks at who just called to her, and she sees an elderly woman. The old lady went on to say, "You left in such a hurry this morning, I didn't have time to invite you over for Thanksgiving dinner. Will you and your boys please join me for Thanksgiving dinner tonight?" Now, Ivy had never met this woman, yet alone seen this woman before, and it felt strange to have dinner with somebody she's never even met. So she was reluctant at first. And if this was like an older creeper guy, I'm sure Ivy would have ran up the stairs into her apartment, locked the door, and drew the blinds. But this old lady was so sweet, so innocent, so inviting, and she wasn't going to take no for an answer. So Ivy said yes, and her and her 2 boys joined the old lady for a Thanksgiving meal. Ivy immediately felt at home in this old lady's apartment. Ivy described it as dimly lit. The table was loaded with food. This is the ultimate grandma Thanksgiving dinner. Just, you can picture it right now, your grandma's meal, probably times 100. The old lady was just so incredibly sweet. Her presence was like electricity. She had a sparkle in her eyes, and she had life in her. And at that moment, with a complete stranger, Ivy felt unconditionally loved. It was the complete opposite feeling from earlier that day. Her sorrow was turned to joy, her emptiness turned to fullness, literally. Ivy described it as one of the most special evenings that she's ever had in her entire life. Before they left, the old lady gave each of them a gift, and then enough containers full of leftover food to last them throughout the whole next week. The next day, Ivy went to return some of the food containers and just visit with the old lady that was so kind to her and her boys. Ivy walks up to the door, knocks, no answer. Knocks again, no answer. Ivy starts to think, oh, is she okay? And she is an old lady. So Ivy walks to the window next to the door and peers inside. The apartment was completely empty. There was not a single piece of furniture in sight. It was dark, and it looked like nobody had been in that apartment in weeks. Well, Ivy's in shock. She's confused. So she decides to go to the apartment manager and see what was going on and see if he knew anything. She quickly goes to his door and bangs on it. The apartment manager opens the door and says, "Oh, hey, Ivy. What can I do for you? Is everything okay?" Ivy asked him what happened to the little old lady that was in apartment 15. The manager looked at Ivy a little strangely and said, "Apartment 15 has been vacant for 10 to 12 weeks. There's nobody in there." Ivy stood there silently for a moment, then finally said, "No, you don't understand. I had Thanksgiving dinner with that old lady yesterday in that apartment." The manager just looked at Ivy like she was crazy and reassured her that nobody's in there. It was locked. No one has been in or out of that apartment in months. In that moment, Ivy realized what had happened was a miracle. That little old lady must have been an angel. Well, Ivy thanked the apartment manager and turned to go back to her own apartment. And she began going over the events in her mind from the previous night. And she realized that the little old lady had known personal things about Ivy that she couldn't have possibly known. Like that she worked at a doctor's office and that her favorite food was potato salad. Ivy wondered how she didn't realize that this lady was an angel while she was there with her 2 boys. And she had never felt this kind of love and peace before in her whole life. And some people might not believe Ivy's story, but for her, it changed her life forever. Because of that miraculous event, Ivy started a nonprofit organization called the Angel Network on the island of Oahu. It's an organization dedicated to helping families in need. Ivy was also chosen as one of President H.W. Bush's 1,000 Points of Light Award, which is a nonprofit organization supporting volunteerism. Ivy's story was so impactful, it helped inspire the hit TV series Touched by an Angel that ran nearly a decade on CBS. And Ivy's story continues to impact people all over the world. And don't forget to entertain strangers, for by so doing, some people have entertained angels without even knowing it.